Kraven the Hunter is Spider-Man's greatest foe, and Kravens Last Hunt is his best hunt of all.
What would you say is the essential difference between a hero and a villain?
Life events.
Life events. So you think they get led to different places by different life events?
That's correct.
Okay. I would probably oppose that idea.
What would be your idea?
I think they're led to the same place, but they react to that place in different ways. You want an example?
I do.
Okay. My example is Kravens Last Hunt.
Okay.
Okay.
Spider-Man storyline.
It's a Spider-Man storyline. That's right. It's a 6-issue crossover series published from October to November of 1987. The series consisted of Web of Spider-Man 31 and 32, The Amazing Spider-Man 293 and 294, and Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man 131 and 132. Originally, the story was supposed to take place just in Amazing Spider-Man, but they realized that if they had it in one series and they had 2 other series of Spider-Man running, that the events of Kraven's Last Hunt wouldn't be as impactful.
Right.
So they turned it into a 2-month crossover using all 3 of the Spider-Man titles that were running at the time. It was written by J.M. DeMatteis.
Comes up again.
Yeah. And penciled by Mike Zeck, with inks by Bob McLeod and colors by Bob Sharon, Janet Jackson.
Janet Jackson?
Not that Janet Jackson. Janet Jackson and Mike Zeck. Mike Zeck was always consistently a good artist, but I have to say this storyline is some of his best work.
Some of his covers are
great.
Are classic.
Well, the classic Mike Zeck Punisher cover where it's firing the Uzis.
Yeah,
and,
the one, the Tombstone.
Tombstone. Yep. Yeah. This one is one of his big ones, and actually one of the covers of this with Spider-Man coming out of the grave.
Yeah.
That's
a Tombstone one.
I thought you were referring to character.
No, the Tombstone, the cover of the Spider-Man Tombstone.
Yes, that's in this storyline.
Oh, that's a classic cover.
Yeah.
Should be on a t-shirt.
Mm-hmm. This actually might be some of Mike Zeck's best work. Actually, they sell t-shirts of
Kraven.
One of the images from this.
Kraven.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kraven going forward.
Right. Yeah.
T-shirt.
Yeah, those are great.
We'll put it up right here.
Yeah. So again, this series was extremely dark for a Spider-Man series, and it was intentionally made that way. J.M. DeMatteis, I said his name wrong the first time. I said Matisse. It's Matteis. J.M. DeMatteis actually planned for this to be a storyline that fit in with some of the dark things going on in comics at the time, but he wanted to show how Spider-Man would be different in reaction to that darkness.
You know what's funny about this is that this is 1987, so we recently did another episode where we looked at his work on Justice League International, which was right after this. And that is far from dark.
Yeah, no, it's very funny. Yeah, right. He has actually a much more humorous...
Because 1987, 1988 is towards the end of the dark phase of comic books, and we're getting into more of a comical,
Well, for that title, definitely.
DC as a whole became...
I thought a lot of it got darker.
No,
After Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, everything kind of...
That's early 80s, late 80s going into 90s. See, I think that
it's
DC went the other way, because then we get Justice League, we get Justice League Europe, we get Blue Beetle, Blue Devil. There's a lot of comics connected in that series.
But if you look at what was happening in Batman at that time...
so Batman's always dark.
And, it was much darker than ever, though, by then, leading up to the 89 movie.
All right.
Yeah. There's other really dark stuff.
But what year is Watchmen? Is 84?
85, and then Dark Knight Returns is 87.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Killing Joke is like 87 or 88, somewhere around there. Yeah. So it all starts getting very, very dark. Right. Anyway, Kraven's Last Hunt, the main characters of the series are Spider-Man, obviously. The Peter Parker Spider-Man. I should make that clear. It's not Miles Morales. Yeah.
At that point, it's only Peter Parker, though.
Right. Kraven the Hunter. A character called Vermin, who shows up in Marvel every once in a while, and Mary Jane Parker, who's not Mary Jane Watson anymore because the year before, she and Peter Parker had gotten married.
At Shea Stadium.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So, just a quick rundown on the character. Spider-Man first appeared in Amazing Fantasy number 15, cover dated August of 1962. He was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. You might have heard of those guys.
I think so.
Yeah. Kraven the Hunter, or Sergei Nikolaevich Kravenov, first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 15, which was cover dated August of 1964. It's almost exactly 2 years after the premiere of Spider-Man. He was also created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Kraven was based on the character of General Zaroff from Richard Connell's short story, The Most Dangerous Game, published in 1924. Apparently Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were both big fans of that story. General Zaroff, the villain of that story, is a big game hunter from Russia who escaped Russia during the 1917 Communist Revolution. And that is actually the origin that we get for Kraven in this story.
Oh, so they basically used the categories exactly how they was.
And we'll talk about why he could have been a boy in 1917, but in 1987 he doesn't appear to be that much older. Right. There's a whole
can't be in his 80s.
Yeah, there's a whole explanation.
Okay.
Yeah. Vermin is Edward Whalen is his real name. He first appeared in Captain America 272. Which was cover dated August of 1982. He actually traditionally was Captain American villain. And, but I think 2 years or a year before this storyline, Spider-Man and Captain America had teamed up to fight Vermin because he's really a little too tough for either one of them to handle on their own.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a genetically modified human. He takes on rat-like traits when he transforms into a monster form and can't really control those transformations that well. In this story, he's a cannibalistic killer living in the sewers of New York City, kidnapping people off the street at night and eating them in the sewers.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. And of course, then we have Mary Jane Parker. Her name was last name was Watson before she was married. Her first appearance, I just looked this up and this is a completely tangential to what we're actually talking about. But this is interesting. I didn't know this. Mary Jane appears in Spider-Man 25, but you don't actually get to see her. You don't see her face.
Okay.
She's like obscured. And then there's like a running joke for almost a year in the comics where you don't actually get a good look at her.
But he's talking about her.
No, Aunt May is always trying to set Peter up with the next door neighbor's niece.
So we don't actually see her.
We don't see who she is. And then she actually gets seen in The Amazing Spider-Man number 42 in November of 1966. And her first reveal, the panel that first shows her, is probably one of the most popular reveals ever in comic book history. It's the one where she's standing in the doorway and she's saying, "Let's face it, Tiger, you've hit the jackpot."
Okay.
That was the first time we get to see her. And that was by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr.
So what's considered her first appearance?
Well, her first appearance
25
is
considered
25 because we see her, but we don't get a good look at her. She's obscured by a plant or something.
So 25 in terms of value is worth more than 42?
Probably.
That's interesting because you really don't even see her.
But 42 is valuable because you first get that look at her.
Okay.
And it's that famous panel of her, Peter's like he's dumbfounded by what she looks like. A simple plot overview of Kravens Last Hunt is basically Kraven decides he's going to die. He's been thinking about his life. He is chronologically in his 80s.
Okay.
But he doesn't look that way because he's been taking these special sort of magic herbs that slow down his aging and give him advanced strength and all this other stuff.
He's a super soldier?
Kind of, yeah. He's like a genetically modified person. And he decides that the last thing he's going to do is he finally has to defeat Spider-Man, the one person he hunted and could not defeat. And he's finally going to do it. And he basically does. He defeats him. He apparently, from what we see at first, kills Spider-Man, then buries him in his costume. And then Kraven...
Black costume.
Yeah, the black costume. But it wasn't the symbiote. It was a material black costume because the symbiote had already been removed by the Fantastic Four.
So he's just wearing a black
He's still wearing black. Right. Kraven then adopts the identity of Spider-Man and goes out to be a better Spider-Man.
Who wears the costume?
The black costume. He goes out. But he's really, really violent. And he actually ends up killing a criminal while in the costume.
Specific or no?
No, just some mugger or something.
Okay.
And he kills the criminal. And that's how everyone kind of realizes that this can't be the real one. Then Spider-Man eventually gets out of the grave. He's not dead. And fights his way back and defeats Kraven, ends up defeating Vermin, and sort of wins the whole thing. That's
as Spider-Man always does.
The overview. But the things that happen in it are really, really interesting and actually have a lot of literary weight to them. James DeMatteis really worked hard on crafting a story that was about the nature of heroes and villains. And he did it in reaction to what was going on at the time.
Russia?
No. Like I said, the Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns had just come out, and they were kind of shifting the entire comic book landscape. Most people misread what those comics were really about, and they thought, let's make all our characters very, very dark and very, very trendy. And J.M. DeMatteis thought, well, Spider-Man couldn't really do that. So what would it be like if Spider-Man went through something really, really dark? How would he react? Because he's not a dark character.
No.
He's had a lot of dark things happen to him, but he's not a dark character at all. So the first time we see the themes that are introduced in this story is when we're introduced to Kraven and then Spider-Man in the story. We're introducing Kraven. He's in his big mansion and somewhere in Midtown Manhattan, this huge townhouse mansion he has. Right. And he's naked and he's been taking hallucinogenic drugs and he's actually attacking some of the trophies in his trophy room as if he's fighting them.
That's what you're doing?
I suppose. Yeah. So he's he's throwing the panther and he's like menacing a gorilla and he punches the head off of a stuffed gorilla and he's talking about how he's both Kraven the Hunter and he's Sergei, Kravinoff.
Right.
And that he has to die soon. And he talks about his mother and how everyone thought his mother was insane and how they had escaped from Russia. And he's alone. He's completely alone. All right.
He has no one left.
No one's there.
He's old.
Right. He's just all by himself.
He's still alive now. It's
right.
2020.
And he actually ends up going up to and putting his hand on this coffin that's set up in one of the rooms. And you have no idea why he's doing that. Right.
Okay.
And then we cut to Spider-Man. Spider-Man is on his way to pay respects at a funeral service for a street snitch named Joe Face. Now.
Okay.
Spider-Man shows up because he used to get information from Joe Face, and then somebody killed him, and now he feels bad, so he shows up, and he shows up at this basically like a criminal funeral where there's all these like hoods standing around, and they can't afford to really,
as Spider-Man or
as Spider-Man, no, in
okay.
costume, and they're one of them is gonna like take a shot at him, and he's like, don't even try it, and like all this other stuff. He kind of intimidates them, and then he throws a big wad of cash into the bowl.
But does Peter Parker have a lot of cash?
I don't know. He's usually poor, but he throws some money in the bowl and he basically says, let's try to get him a better coffin and a decent burial.
Okay.
So what you're seeing is like he's going to someplace dark and they're
introducing... This is after all the events?
No, this is right at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. So he shows up and he's also interacting with like ideas about mortality because it's a funeral and Joe Face is in the coffin in front of him. Just kind of similar to Kravinoff, standing near the coffin.
Right.
But instead of being alone, he's surrounded by people. He's in a community of people, even though they're angry at him.
Right.
And
he wins them over, though.
He is giving rather than thinking just of himself.
Right.
And there's a point where he actually says, they want to kill Spider-Man. And they don't even realize that person doesn't exist. There is no Spider-Man. There's only Peter Parker in a costume. Okay. So basically saying that no matter what happens, he's still himself.
DeMatteis really is multi-leveled.
Oh, so good. So good, yeah. So they're already drawing this different identity where Kraven defines himself completely by the persona of Kraven the Hunter. Right. Spider-Man is like, I'm just a guy in a costume and I'm always Peter Parker.
I'm a regular guy.
Right, like just a normal person. So that is where we get introduced to three of the big themes of the story, where we have darkness or descent into darkness, mortality, and identity are all three really, really big themes, right? So later on in the story, after Kraven has apparently killed Spider-Man and buried him, like I said, he takes on his costume. He dresses
Spider-Man.
up as right. This is Mary Jane is out looking for him because Peter's been missing for a long time.
Right.
And she's worried. So she's out in the street looking for him. She gets attacked by muggers. And then apparently Spider-Man shows up to rescue her. But it's not Peter. She doesn't realize
it's not Peter. Okay.
Now, after the vicious, vicious beating that Kraven puts down on these muggers, she's like, "Oh, that's not Peter," and he just takes off.
But at the time, she knew he was Spider-Man.
Yeah, right, because she's married to him. Right. Not long after this, Peter actually digs his own way out of the grave.
Okay.
And his only thought is of Mary Jane, is getting back to Mary Jane.
Save his wife.
Right. So Kraven, going into the darkness, adopting the black costume of Spider-Man, all his thoughts are of brutality, violence, superiority. Spider-Man being in the darkness, his only thought is the love of his wife.
Right.
And this is what's going to pull him
back. That's what separates them.
And here's the separation of the hero and the villain.
Right.
The motivation. Spider-Man's acting out of love and compassion. Kraven is rage and violence and darkness. Okay. Right? So that's what this line gets drawn all the way through, right? Then you have Vermin at the end. Kraven realizes Spider-Man could never beat Vermin on his own. He needed Captain America's help.
Okay.
So he says, well, in order to be better, I will go and defeat him on my own. And he does. And he viciously, viciously beats Vermin. Terribly.
Okay.
Terribly. And then takes him captive. And when Spider-Man shows up at Kraven's house in order to be like, I can't believe you did
As
this
Spider-Man.
as Spider-Man.
They're both Spider-Man?
Well, Kraven has the mask off. No, they're not doing the meme.
Okay.
Kraven has the mask off. He forces Vermin to attack Spider-Man.
Okay.
And Spider-Man doesn't win, but he escapes. And Vermin escapes as well. And then when Spider-Man eventually does catch up to Vermin, he doesn't beat him up. He actually gets him arrested by the police, and he's going to turn him over to Reed Richards to see if Reed Richards can cure him.
Okay.
So again, his response is compassion, not the violence of Kraven, right? At the end of the story, Kraven, feeling like he's won, he's finally finished his last hunt, he actually puts his rifle in his mouth, blows his brains out.
Really?
And falls into the coffin.
Kraven kills himself?
Falls into the coffin that we see at the beginning of the story.
I read it, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, he shoots himself, kills himself. Okay. And Peter, the last panel is Peter reunited with Mary Jane. So one finds nothing but darkness, the other finds a return to love. And
so that was it? That's the last time we see Kraven in the comic books. He died and
Kraven has come back. He's been brought back by Calypso, I think.
Back. I know villains or heroes that have been dead. If they're popular enough.
Right. But the really cool thing that you get through the story is this breakdown of what makes a hero a hero. And J.M. DeMatteis did this because it was in response to all the darkness that he saw coming up from things like Watchmen,
Spider-Man doesn't need to be dark.
Right. And that if Spider-Man were to encounter something dark, he would meet it with love, compassion, and all this other stuff.
He would still be Spider-Man.
Right. He wouldn't become the sort of edgy, dark character that you might expect in that time period, you know?
He doesn't need to be.
He doesn't have to be the Dark Knight.
Okay.
Yeah, he's just Peter Parker. Just a regular guy.
And how long after the removal of Venom from him is this? This is...
I think a year.
Okay.
I think about a year.
All right.
Yeah, because then the symbiote was gone for a while.
Right.
And then it shows back up when they create Venom.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is Spider-Man, what? What should you say it was? Spider-Man 293?
Yeah. Amazing Spider-Man.
So we first see Venom in 298.
Yeah. Oh, so I guess he comes up pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's coming up quickly because this is probably... McFarlane takes over in 297, if I remember correctly.
Oh, so just after this.
This is probably that last run. I didn't realize I didn't realize that Kravens Last Hunt was that close to McFarlane's run.
It's funny too because you mentioned McFarlane. Remember when McFarlane brought in that fourth Spider-Man title just called Spider-Man?